Hey, what's going on, everybody? And welcome back to Horror Stew. I am, of course, Ike Isaacs, your tour guide, if you will, of the supernatural and the horror and the spooky. Today, we're just going to talk about another film. Now, a little bit of a prerequisite here. So, this obviously, I'm titling it as a underrated horror film. And I'm not sure. I'm actually not quite sure if I would truthfully categorize it as underrated horror film. The two big entries of this series, I would say, had some relative commercial success, and again, I don't think I would necessarily say that these are underrated, but got to put it somewhere, and I'm just going to put it as underrated. But today we are talking about none other than the Blair Witch Project and subsequent films. The Blair Witch Project. Oh man, sorry for that big inhale, but Blair Witch Project. Oh man, I love the Blair Witch Project. So I will prerequisite this by saying that I'm not going to talk about all the obscure entries. There are a lot of books, novels, comic books. There are a lot of I don't want to say a lot, but there are a few like mockumentaries, things like that that are companions to the mainline series, which are great. And there are also some early video games and things of that nature. But we're going to talk about the three primary movies of the series, and then there was also a major video game of the series that came a little bit later. So we're going to start, of course, with its origins, the Blair Witch Project in 1999. So the Blair Witch Project of 1999. Most of us, I'm assuming, have seen this. Again, this is a pretty, I would say, well-known film. It was pretty well received. It was honestly I would say one of the first really commercially successful found footage films, because you had some stuff prior to this, or maybe some general information or general projects, but I feel like this was one of the most successful and most believed, project. And the reason for that, of course, is that there was a somewhat controversial marketing campaign where they used the internet, right? The internet was kind of a new thing at this time, but they posted, what was it, missing people per posters of these people, right? And they were acting like these people were actually gone, like just disappeared, right? And they also had like a website that showed the diary of the girl, and the diary was fairly realistic, and yeah. So basically, they use some real guerrilla marketing. They use the early days of the internet to really just shape their reality, which is great. That is a fantastic way to make some money and get some views and everything else. And it worked. The 1990 Blair Witch Project, for a lot of the ways, it's a very, very, very successful film, and in my opinion, is one of the first true found footage films, because it follows all of the tropes of what I would say is a iconic found footage film. These events were real. It was filmed, and it looks like it was filmed on smaller camera devices. I know the one guy had kind of a bigger device for a bunch of it. But honestly, the Blair Witch Project, it's a fantastic film. I feel like most of us have seen this, so I'm not going to go too deep into what it's about. I think we all know that. I'm just going to give just a real brief synopsis. Basically, it's three people go into the woods to basically do a documentary about the Blair Witch. The Blair Witch, of course, is a faux legend of I think it was Maryland, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Burkittsville, Maryland, which I guess used to be Blair, Maryland, or something to that effect. And they're basically doing a documentary, and during this documentary, things start going wrong, and essentially they all end up in one shape, form, or another, potentially dead. One of the great things about the Blair Witch Project itself is that you never really see who's doing what they're doing to these people, right? You can never put a face to the evil. right? And most horror films, you're able to put a face to what's going on, right? Nightmare on Elm Street, you can say it's Freddy Voorhees, or Freddy Voorhees. On Nightmare on Elm Street, you can see it's Freddy Krueger. On Friday the 13th, you can see it's Jason Voorhees, and so on and so forth. But with this one, we have the general idea of who it is, right? We know it's the Blair Witch, but we don't see the Blair Witch. We don't know what the Blair Witch looks like. We just see her terrorizing these people. Now, this is obviously barring any theories about the Blair Witch. There's a very common theory that I even believe a little bit, that there was no Blair Witch, that the two male filmmakers of the group were actually there just to kill the female filmmaker. And if you ever want to go into that a little bit, go check out Film Theory. It's Matt Pat who does game theory. He also does film theory. There's a film theory about the Blair Witch Project, how there's no witch, which is very believable. I believe it 100%. But so anyways, the second film in this series was not as big of a success, and I think there's a reason for that. All right, so the second one was Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2 in 2000. So I think that the second Blair Witch movie was really railing off of the success of the Blair Witch Project in 1999. So much so that they said to themselves, we're going to make a bigger budget movie. And they just really missed the mark. Really, it just, for lack of a better phrase, Book of Shadows, the second Blair Witch movie, it just misses what the first movie was all about. The first movie was all about being, because Blair Witch Project, it was literally the big point, the big purpose, the big mood was, this is real, right? And you couldn't say the same thing about Book of Shadows. Book of Shadows was very, very theatricalized. It was very scripted in a way, and it just didn't really, to me, it didn't hit the mark. It really missed the point, in my opinion, because you have such a great movie, which is the Blair Witch Project, and then you have Book of Shadows that follows up. That's not really, in my opinion, a true to form Blair Witch movie. Now, and here's the bad thing. You never really see another true to form Blair Witch movie, because obviously the first Blair Witch Project was unique. And you can try and copy that uniqueness and the success that the Blair Witch Project had, but you're not going to ever receive as successful and as specific of a characterization of a movie than you will get with the Blair Witch Project. So, and here's something that I've always heard from people, is that some people have such high expectations for the sequels that they just completely disregard them. And I'm not having high expectations, because I've always said, I can find something good about any movie. It was just that the Book of Shadows really missed the purpose of being a Blair Witch movie. But basically, just brief synopsis of the Blair Witch Project 2, Book of Shadows. We're back in Maryland's Black Hill regions. It's in the wake of the Blair Witch Project, of course. And there was a lot of media coverage, of course, for the initial film. So basically, the movie's real-life setting of Burkittsville, Maryland is kind of where we're at. So there are these folks. There was specifically a guy who was a black sheep townie who was recently released from a mental institution. He had an obsession with the Blair Witch, and he created a business app over it. He lured 4 people in from the to Burkittsville for a tour of the witch's purported Black Hills haunt. And now the clients were also fixated on the film, and for reasons they themselves may not fully comprehend, they were very just mind blown. They really were attached to it. Basically, it was because obviously I don't want to read all of the synopsis that I wrote down, because it's just a lot. basically there's some disagreement between the folks whether or not the Blair Witch is real, and they spend the night and they go over a lot of the sinister sites of the Blair Witch lore. And they basically follow a similar formula to the first film. They go to sleep, see a bunch of shit's happening, a lot of paranormal stuff, and it's kind of like a reoccurring thing. There's security cam footage that specifically incites what's going on and kind of goes over what's happening. And then to follow up on that, there were, in the film itself, there were a lot of murders that we actually see happen. And again, this movie does well by not showing us an actual Blair Witch per se. It basically, the film, like obviously this is a spoiler, because this is the big highlight of the film. You see that the people were being like possessed in a way to kill people. So the visitors were killing people at this like haunt, and that was kind of the big thing, right? So and then so I'm not gonna go too much more into that, just because I didn't really care for it. It wasn't a horrible film, but it wasn't great. But something I was really surprised about was the next film in the series, which was called Blair Witch in 2016. So now what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the 2016 film Blair Witch. So here are 3 things I'm going to say about that without too much conjecture. So I've seen the film, obviously. So number 1 is that this film completely ignores Book of Shadows, as it should. Number 2, this film is a direct tie into the first one because it is specifically following the female in the first Blair Witch film. I cannot remember her name for the life of me. Had a brother. That brother is wanting to go back to the hills or the hills and woods of Marrittsville, Ellettsville, wherever in Maryland, to try and find, not necessarily find her, but try and find some proof that she was there, right? And so yeah, basically that's kind of the 2 big things about the plot. The third thing I want to say is that this was a much larger budget film than the other 2 films. Okay, significantly so, because this film definitely goes into more of a typical horror franchise concept. Again, for lack of a better phrase, the film follows paranormal activity-esque levels of editing and of filming in regards to found footage films. So it's not as genuine or something of that nature. It's not as genuine as the first film, of course. As I expected it not to be. Definitely the subsequent films in the series are not going to follow the same formula or the same genuine scares and thrills that we have with the original film. But what it does do well is it does actually create a very cohesive storyline. Obviously, the bad thing about this film is that the bad thing about this film is that it was in production hell for a long time. At least according to my notes, it was in production hell since 2009. It didn't come out until 2016. Now, basically, the film was initially intended to be a sequel to the first film, and actually potentially contain actors from the first film in some way, shape, or form. And it would, of course, like we said, the final product, as well as the original intention, was never to mention the second film at all. However, there was some further development, because it looks like it apparently started in 2009, kind of went under the radar, had some further development in 2011, and then eventually they couldn't get anybody to match up or approve ideas or do any shit, so they're like, okay, whatever. And then in 2015, the third Blair Witch movie was still in talks, and then bada bing, bada boom, 2016 rolls around, and they released a trailer at Comic-Con called under the faux title The Woods, which turned out to be the Blair Witch Project film. So, not bad. Not bad. It was very commercialized, very large budget project-esque. It didn't follow the same makings of a low-budget film where they're filming from their hand camcorders and stuff of that nature. So, again, not bad film. Not going to say it was a bad film. It was just your typical film, found footage film from the 2000s that is heavily commercialized and has a big budget. And I'm not going to go too much into detail about the story just because, it follows the first film, and it's following the brother of the female filmmaker from the first film, who is trying to find some evidence that she's still alive. I think the primary perspective is that there was a video uploaded to the internet that somebody had found in the woods, and it showed somebody running through the house, and they stopped for a moment and were looking at a mirror, and it looked like the sister. So, of course, the brother was like, okay, maybe she's still alive, or shit, maybe I can find some more evidence of her death. And so they went into the woods, and, of course, you and I could probably guess what happens. But the bad part about this is that they actually put a face to a name. They show you the titular Blair Witch. And showing the Blair Witch and showing what it looked like, it didn't look like a typical witch. So it led a lot of people to speculate, is the Blair Witch actually a witch? Is it some other creation or creature that's tormenting them, some other supernatural entity? Or is it not supernatural at all? There was actually a lot of theories that the Blair Witch was in fact an alien. But watch the film for yourself and just go online and follow the rabbit hole down, because why not? The last thing I wanted to touch on, and the reason I wanted to touch on this primarily is because so there were more than just one video game for the Blair Witch series. There were three video games based on the films that expanded on myths, and they were also developed to focus on different aspects of the mythology, specifically Rustin Parr, Coffin Rock, and Ellie Kedward. These were either people or places in the films that were already talked about, and so these games really received mixed reviews. They were very linear, clumsy controls, camera angles were meh, and they were very short. All right, there were 3 volumes, volume 1, 2, and 3 of the Blair Witch original games in 2000. They were very short, and they were just not very well received. All right, now lore wise, they were very good. They very much expanded on the general lore of the films that we didn't really get to touch on, because the Blair Witch films are only like an hour and a half long, and we got enough lore to get us into it, but not enough lore to satisfy our questions, right? And then, of course, the follow-up films didn't really touch on it at all. They just used the first film as a basis. That being said, there was also an additional game released in 2019 called Blair Witch, and it was a first-person survival horror game. And honestly, I've not played this one. I have seen some people play it, and I have a want to play this game. Right, this game genuinely interests me because it follows a similar formula, I feel like, to games like Outlast, where it while it may be a linear line of what the game wants you to do, you are still going to be scared, right? Because in Outlast, if you never played the video game, same concept. It's a very linear thought process. You start from point A, you get to point B, but the game is genuinely scary. You really can't fight back, and I feel like this game follows a very similar process, similar concept. That being said, I've never played it, so I'm not going to give you my opinion on it. And of course, I went back and fully watched through the original Blair Witch games be played, so I can kind of give an idea about what that's about. But like I said, they're very short, very quick to play through, great lore-wise, but otherwise it was just sort of a cash, not I would say a cash grab, but it kind of was, just because they were wanting to release some more content for the Blair Witch to sort of lead up to, and also give some more content for the second film, I feel like. But regardless of that, so that's kind of my general thing. I'm going to finish this off just on a real quick overall take. So, of course, in my opinion, if I had to tell you what I liked and what I did not like about the Blair Witch Project, just in general, the very first Blair Witch Project is a fantastic film that, in my opinion, has set the bar very high for all found footage horror films that came after it. I don't feel like any film has truly lived up to the same spectacle that was presented with the first Blair Witch Project. The Blair Witch Project 2 was a very large shortcoming overall when it came to following up on such a categoric film such as the Blair Witch Project. So Book of Shadows falls super short, and it falls so short that I would almost say that it is not a good movie at all. The Blair Witch of 2016, the Blair Witch movie in 2016, in my opinion, is the better of the sequels by far. And it gives more life to the series. It gives more connection to the first film than the second film does. However, it still falls to the same issues that all modern horror movies fall to, is that they're treading on old ground. And instead of treading on old ground in a new way, it follows the same tropes and horror models that we always see. So yeah. And of course, like I mentioned, video game wise, the original 3 games from 2000 were very short, very much an expansion on the mythology and the lore, but they really fall short when it comes to what matters in a video game, which is replayability, length, and actual design when it comes to how it works technically. The Blair Witch game that was released more recently in 2019 really can't give a solid opinion on it, but it looks promising. I've never played it. I've seen some people play parts of it. I've seen the trailers, so it looks promising. But I'll save that for if I ever play the game, of course. So, on that note, tell us what you think about the Blair Witch Project. Which films did you like? Which films did you hate? Did you play any of the old games? Did you play the new game? Have you read any of the books, comic books, novels? Let us know in the comment section down below. Tweet us, Facebook us, whatever you want to do. All of that will be in the description, and of course, that'll be all at the end of the film. But for right now, we're going to stop it right there. So for everybody out there who is watching, of course, stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy, and keep on growing. See ya.